Great. All right, we'll get started. Thanks everyone so much for joining this call. Just to introduce myself, my name's Tig. I'm a National Campaigns Manager here at the NEU, dealing with our Stop School Cuts campaign. And today we're holding a Zoom meeting to run through more about the campaign, what we're doing in the run-up to the spring forecast that's happening in March, and to run you through a bit about the very unfortunate new cuts that have been announced by the government. Just a reminder that we are recording this call, which has already started. And as people would have been doing in the chat, please do introduce yourselves, let us know where you're dialing in from, and why you've joined the call today. Just give you an overview of what we're going to go through. So we're going to hear first from Daniel Kebede, who's the NEU General Secretary, on how the campaign's been going so far, some of the successes we've had over the years, and what to expect. We've then got Chris, who is a head teacher at a school in Lambeth, who's going to share a bit more about the impact that he's seeing at his school. We've got Andrew on the call, who's going to explain about the cuts and run you through some of the key figures around this. And then we've got Claire, who is another head teacher in Milton Keynes, who's going to share a bit more about what she's been doing with the campaign and how you can all get involved yourselves. And before we go, we'll share a toolkit with you that has templates, guides, advice, everything that you need to carry out actions and support the campaign. Which is hopefully the reason that you're on the call today. So thanks all for joining. Start off, I'm going to hand over to Daniel Kebede, who's the NEU General Secretary. Daniel.
Thank you very much, Tig, and really pleased to be here and on this panel. I think I'm going to just start with a very brief story of the School Cuts campaign. We've had 14 years of chronic cuts from conservative chancellors that have left schools in desperate need and in desperate conditions. Classrooms are so under-resourced that teachers have had to buy their own glue sticks and essential school supplies. I remember when I first became a teacher, just after the election of the coalition government, and I remember resourcing my classroom, going out and putting a receipt into reception. Long gone are those days. Teachers and school staff are ever more plugging the gaps. School buildings are, of course, crumbling in some schools. The ceilings have been quite literally caving in, boilers breaking down in the middle of winter, leaving children learning in the cold. We are sent regularly videos and photos of the dire state of repair that our school buildings are currently in. Our class sizes in the UK are also amongst the highest in Europe. 1 million children currently are taught in class sizes of 31 or more. But this campaign has and will continue to accomplish things because of our organising and the work that we've done together to spread the word in our communities and push back. Our campaign from 2016 to 2019 won a series of concessions from the then government. We won money for SEND, for maintained nurseries and for mainstream schools. In total, we've won over £20 billion for school budgets, but that is absolutely not enough, and we need to do it again. Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer promised change. Many of our members, many teachers around the country voted Labour on the back of that promise. But after 14 years of damaging school cuts, we expected this new government to take strong action to restore what has been lost. But instead, they are introducing new cuts of £700 million, which will result in 76% of primary schools and 94% of secondary schools facing further cuts next year. On December the 10th, the government recommended to the independent pay review body that the teacher pay rise should be 2.8% for the years 2025 to 2026, but they have decided not to allocate any funding to cover it. There's no way around it. It is an unfunded pay award that will put huge demands on school budgets. I don't think anyone on this call can identify efficiencies, as was worded in the government's recommendation to the pay review body. So what are we expecting from the new government? Well, we are looking to build momentum up to the spring forecast on the 26th of March to influence the Chancellor to reverse her decision. In the coming months, we're planning to build public visibility of the new cuts to change the political conversation. We want to educate our friends and our neighbours on these new cuts to bring more people into this campaign. We want to make sure our MPs know that this is a priority issue and find more people in Parliament who are willing to stand up for schools. How the spring action is going to help us get there. We are dialing up the pressure in the lead up to the Chancellor's next budget announcement in our communities, online, at our MP surgeries and in their inbox. We will do this by organising our school communities, raising public awareness about the impact of the new cuts and putting pressure on our elected leaders. And I shall stop there, Tyke.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Right, I'm going to pass straight over to Chris Ashley-Jones, who's the Executive Head Teacher of Hitherfield Primary School in Lambeth, and he's going to talk a little bit more about what these cuts actually look like in our schools.
Hi, thank you. Evening, everybody. So as has been said, I'm Executive Head Teacher at Hitherfield Primary School. I've been the head for 19 years. Hitherfield is a three-form entry primary school with a nursery in Lambeth in South London. We have 615 pupils on roll. Like most London schools, though, we are being impacted by falling rolls. Snapshot of the school, we're 22% free school meals, 17% special educational needs, and 35% English as additional language. We were most recently inspected last October. Joy that was too. We've been involved, well, I've been involved in the school cuts campaign for several years. We've had banners out, we've been tweeting, we voted for industrial action. When I say we, I'm talking about myself and the school, the teachers and so on. We've supported colleagues when they have taken strike action. We've spread the word with colleagues and we've also spread the word with parents. To be honest, it's just really, really sad that we're still here. You would have thought with this changing government that we might be able to have moved on positively, but alas, we're here. Before I start talking a little bit about the impact on my school and other schools in Lambeth and the ones I know, I thought it'd be quite interesting to have a reflection on an example of some of the cost increases that we've dealt with. So as has been mentioned, since 2010, there's been basically real terms fall in financing. But in the last few years alone, we've just seen huge changes. So we've seen a 15% increase in the wage cost of support staff over the last 3 years, which has been completely unfunded. We've seen a 12% increase in the wage costs of teachers, only partially funded. Also, the on costs that people don't seem to talk about have increased as well, 5% increase in on costs for teaching staff, again, unfunded. And then we have the increased national insurance costs that will be coming in April as well ahead of us. Interesting that while staff costs have gone up, the DfE is now recommending that schools only spend 75% of their budget on staff, where it used to be 85% not so long ago. So it's a bit of a dichotomy there. Energy costs have increased. Ours have increased by 18% in about the last 18 months. Costs of resources generally have increased and basically well above the rate of inflation. If you want to buy photocopier paper at the moment, it's doubled in cost over the last 18 months for us, twice the price it used to be. Technology in schools has never really been funded. The costs of development of new equipment and maintaining old equipment keep rising. I'm not sure if people are aware, but apparently in October this year, Microsoft are changing their operating system and older devices won't be able to work on it. So that's going to be fun trying to update everything there. Capital costs have increased as well. And yet the devolved capital funding that we get in schools for repairs and maintenance hasn't changed for a number of years. So there's just a little snapshot there. But in addition to that, what is the sort of impact it's having on the school and the children? Well, the obvious impact for us and most schools has been a reduction in staff since 2010. And again, that's got more exacerbated in the last few years. As far as senior staff in my school, we've cut those by 2.4 full-time equivalent, or basically a 34% reduction in senior staff. For teachers, we've cut it by nearly 5 teachers, so that's a 17% reduction in teaching staff. We used to have EAL specialist support staff. They've cut those, but we've cut those by 85% over the last few years. Learning mentors, we've cut those by 53%. So we now have a 1.6 full-time equivalent of learning mentors. Support staff, we've had really big changes there. We've probably seen an overall cut of about 20%, but also we've had to move to using much more agency staff so that we have got flexibility if needed. So what does this look like? What is the impact of that? Well, everybody in the school is doing more with less. PPA cover is not covered by qualified teachers anymore. It's covered by HLTAs. And with all due respect to HLTAs, and mine are fantastic. Obviously, they haven't had the same education and training as a teacher has had. We've got less time for subject leaders to be out of class and doing subject leader work. And this is when Ofsted has made their accountability greater than it's ever been before. Pupils requiring intervention, whether it's to catch up or be further challenged, have less support now from trained teachers than they've had in the past. EAL pupils, as mentioned, get less support academically. We now have to target any EAL support really to new arrivals in the country who don't have any English at all. So children with some English are getting less and less support. The learning mentors are obviously stretched. We have had some positive interactions and support from the mental health in schools teams, but they only target certain levels of need. But overall, the demand for mental health support has increased phenomenally, as I'm sure you're all aware. So early intervention really is needed more than ever before. All teaching assistant support in my school now is prioritised to children who either have education healthcare plans or children who are on their way to them. So teachers themselves get very little sort of traditional classroom teaching assistant support that they used to have. We've had to cut the amount of spending on our curriculum. We've reduced our curriculum resources expenditure by 50% over the last 2 years. So we're now relying more and more on our PTA for even some of the basics like reading books, playground equipment, and so on. We're in a lucky position that our school buildings had a major investment when there were lots of children and not enough places. So for my school, I will say that major maintenance problems haven't been required, but we are currently sort of delaying and putting off as much as we can, sort of upgrading things or just basically general wear and tear and things. So that's generally a snapshot from my school, but across my sort of networks from other Lambeth schools, I'm seeing exhausted staff. I'm speaking to many head teachers who are stressed about money and the future of their schools. We're seeing restructures across schools all the time, and actually some schools, we've even seen them doing multiple restructures. And understandably, when you're in that sort of situation, general staff morale is very low. In Lambeth, we're seeing less pupils coming through into schools now due to the demographics, and yet we're seeing the number of applications for education healthcare plans continuing to increase. It's really, quite strange, really. There must be many reasons for that, but I also think it's partly down to the fact that parents realise it's the only way they can get their child to get the support that they need. We're seeing more and more tired school buildings across the borough, and actually there is an element of falling standards as well. So on that cheery note, what does the future hold? To be honest, 19 years into my headship, and I don't actually know. I've never experienced anything like this before financially. Approximately half of Lambeth schools are in a deficit financial position. My own school, we're now teetering on the edge of that as well. We know there are further cost pressures coming. So what else can we do? Well, unlike other professions, and I think sometimes people don't understand this, we have to, quite rightly, put a teacher in front of every single class. You can't double up classes. You can't just ring the parents and say, kids can't come in today, the teacher's off sick or something. We have to do that, and we have to obviously then put in the support for every child with an education and healthcare plan. So I don't really know where the next cuts are going to come from. The 2.8% increase that Daniel's mentioned will cost my school approximately £70,000 in the next financial year, as well as all those other increases I've talked about. So it's going to be a huge challenge. Really, it's possible restructures, less support for children, especially our most vulnerable. Not the situation we want to be in. So really, I'm delighted to be on this call because we have to act now. Our schools are on their knees. They have been on their knees for many, many years. And the worry is that we're going to fail the children going forward. That's me, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chris. I think you painted a very worrying picture there, but very helpful for everyone here. I'm going to pass over to Andrew Baisley now, who's my colleague here at the NEU, and he's going to run through more about the statistics around these new cuts.
Thank you, Ty. And I'm afraid, oh, hold on a minute. I don't know how to change that. There we go. That's what I wanted to show you. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through some numbers around school cuts that we're facing next year. So as people have said, the government have recommended that teachers' pay will rise by 2.8% in September. But school funding will only rise by £800 million for mainstream schools, or 2.2% per pupil in April. And as you can see, there's a gap between those two figures. This is the smallest increase in school funding since 2017. And the government themselves even admit that most schools will not be able to cover their costs. But to add to that, I said that funding was going up by 2.2% per pupil. However, the number of pupils has gone down. This is the first year where the number of pupils has fallen, and there were 44,388 fewer pupils in school this year compared to last year. Now that's hugely in the primary sector. In fact, the number of primary pupils has fallen even more, 48,000 fewer primary pupils, and still there's an extra 4,000 more secondary pupils. So primary schools are going to have got the particular challenge of having not having enough per pupil, but also having fewer pupils. So you get a double squeeze on costs and funding. Moving on a bit. Now, we calculate that school costs will rise per pupil by 3.4% next year. That's because of the teachers' pay award, which is spread over 2 school years. So actually it works out as 4%. Support staff, the government are recommending they get 2.8% as well. However, it's worth bearing in mind that category, they're paid as part of local government, and that's 2.8% across local government. Many support staff in schools are paid on the minimum wage, and the minimum wage is actually going up faster than that. It's going up by 6.5%. It's, I think, a bit of a travesty that so many school support staff are paid the minimum wage. So I'm pleased that it's going up faster than other staff. However, schools are going to struggle to cover that. And then we think general inflation, which is quite a small proportion of school cost, about 20%, is going up by 2.4%. So overall, we've got school costs we think are going to rise by 3.4%, but funding's only rising by 2.2%. And the impact of that overall is that there's a shortfall in funding for next year of £700 million. And that we calculate that means that 76% of primary schools will not have enough funding to cover their costs, even if they have enough pupils. And so it'll probably be worse than that, because many of them will also have falling roles to deal with on top of it. And a staggering 94% of secondary schools will not be able to cover their costs. Now, I've got a little map you can see on the right-hand side there. And as you can see, it's all coloured in red. And that's because every single local authority area in the country will not have enough money to cover their costs. There are certain black spots like Stoke-on-Trent and some of the inner London boroughs, but all over the country, schools are going to be in a very difficult financial position. Now, the other rather depressing fact about this is if we look at school funding over the long term since 2010, what I've got here is mainstream funding per pupil. And it rose initially under the coalition government, but for two reasons. One, they introduced the pupil premium, but also this is compared with school costs, and salaries were for school staff were frozen for 3 years. So that meant they had very low costs for that period. With the election of the Conservative government in 2015, there were then two very sharp years of cuts. And following the very strong campaign around school cuts at the 2017 general election, it then stayed still a bit. And then you get from 2019, you actually see it going up a bit. However, the cost of the pandemic really ate into the additional money we won then. And since then, it's very slowly declined. But the worrying thing is that next year it falls quite a bit. And actually, the amount of school resource, the amount of money going into schools will actually be at its lowest ever level since 2010 next year. So it's very disappointing that Labour, who promised to fix public services, in particular schools and hospitals, is actually going to really harm schools next year. And then finally, you can see the impact of all of those years of cuts as well, because school finances are really fragile. This chart was done, it comes from the Department for Education. It was asking head teachers about what's the financial position of your school. And only 3% of primary schools and 6% of secondary schools said they felt in a secure financial position. And as you can see, the red ones said they felt their finances were very, very precarious. And in December, the government released their latest financial statistics on schools, and they showed that we've got the highest proportion of schools in deficit since at least 2010. So 1 in 7 schools are now in deficit. And I think that means that schools are not in a good position to respond to making cuts, because they've already made all the cuts that they possibly could already over the last 14 years, which is why we have the highest primary class sizes in Europe, the highest secondary class sizes on record, and as Daniel said, more than 1 million children taught in classes of over 30. And unfortunately, unless Rachel Reeves changes her mind and does invest in schools as she promised to, then we're going to see those statistics get worse. And one other thing I would say, because of the falling roles, I think a lot of primary schools are going to be put at risk of closure unless they're protected with an increase in school funding. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Next up, we're going to hear from Claire Wilson, who's head teacher of Woodend Infant and Preschool in Milton Keynes. And Claire's going to tell us a bit about how she got involved with the campaign and also how you can all take action this spring.
Hello there. Yes, so my name's Claire Wilson and I am the head teacher of Woodend Infant and Preschool in Milton Keynes. I've been involved with the school cuts campaign for a little while now, and like so many of us here on this call, I went into teaching thinking that I would just be making a difference to children, but that's just become harder and harder, and I've seen such significant change since being a teacher and then a deputy head teacher and then a head teacher. And it's just a completely different landscape now than it once was, and it's just after more than a decade of cuts becoming impossible. So I first got involved with the school cuts campaign. I just felt very desperate and very cross with the situation that we've all found ourselves in here. I know certainly in my school, sounds very similar to Chris, that I have cut spending to the bare bones. I've had to prioritise what little money we do have. I am in a deficit myself, and it just feels impossible to get out of it. we don't have any ICT resources in my school. We don't have a caretaker. My business manager regularly puts the bins out. It's something that I never thought I would see happening, really. Just to put into context, our capital budget is around £4,500, and that's got to cover buying ICT resources. That's got to pay for repairs to the building, maintenance, health and safety. It doesn't cover it. So then we're taking money from what we should be spending on resources. So it's just laughable, really, and very, very depressing. So I felt that, I needed to do something really to try and take some action, which is why I wanted to get involved with the School Cuts campaign. We've got to fight back. We've got to build as much pressure on the Chancellor as we can. So I know that there is the Spring Action, which is currently taking place, will take place from February the 24th to March the 25th. And this is a way for us to all come together collectively and focus our efforts. So we really need to call upon you here today and your colleagues. We need you to spread the word, really, so that you can help us to take action. So you can do it by yourself, you can do it in a team, you can hand out leaflets at your school gates, you can hang posters in your community, and the leaflets will introduce people to what the new cuts are and how schools will be impacted. It's really important to get that message out there, and the work that I've done as part of the School Cuts campaign, we've spread that message to our parents and got them on board as well, because I think a lot of parents just have no idea how tough it is in schools, and they want the best for their children, but they don't realise what we're up against. And so I think it's really important that they need to understand that as well, get them on board. Every conversation that you have with colleagues and with parents could bring someone new into this movement. I'm always spreading the word to all my head teacher colleagues and saying you need to get involved. Write an open letter to your MP. There's lots of templates out there. I just saw one actually earlier that was emailed to me via somewhere. So, they're out there if you need them, or just write your own passionate letter, because I think once you get started, probably won't be able to stop. Invite your MP in. We're really lucky in Milton Keynes with our new Labour MP, Chris. He's actually really involved and has reached out to schools himself. He's been into my school. I know he's been into lots of other schools in the local area as well. And he's really keen to get on board and listen to the issues. So I think, I'd met some other MPs when I was lucky enough to go to Downing Street with the School Cuts campaign to present an open letter to Rachel Reeves. And they were all feeling really passionate about this as well. So I'm feeling a bit let down at the moment, but I do know that a lot of the MPs are actually really keen to get involved and support this campaign. So, don't be disheartened. We've got to keep on going and reach out. And then there's also the social toolkit as well, which share the School Cuts campaign content with online communities in your area. So if I've learned one thing from my time with this campaign, it is definitely that if I make a stand, then someone else will too. And the only way we're going to get change is if we work on this together. And I was just thinking, as people were talking, what other sector would feel guilty about taking a pay increase? And I do, and we shouldn't, and that's not acceptable. We should be able to have a pay increase for our hard work and it not be at the detrimental effect of our school buildings and our children's education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. I think really inspiring words there. Just to reiterate what Claire said at the end, so we're really keen for you all to get involved. Thank you so much for joining this call today. But we really hope that you'll sort of take this away and take more action in your local community. So as Claire said, you can leaflet at the school gates. We've got brand new shiny leaflets explaining all about these new cuts, which you can order. I think the order form has just been posted in the chat now, that you can order from there. And yeah, we really encourage you to engage with your MP to continue to amplify the pressure on the government and help us find more MPs who are willing to be champions for our campaign. You can send a letter, as Claire said, or request a meeting. All the information that you need around that is in our Spring Action Toolkit, which has also been posted in the chat. There's draft letters that you can send there for your MP. And finally, please do join our WhatsApp group, specifically about the Spring Action, where you'll get more updates about this action. You can see what other activists are doing. You can post all the activities that you're taking part in and share your own plans. We're hoping it'll build a nice little community there of everyone that's involved in the campaign, so please do join. That's everything from us today, so thank you all for coming. it's been great to see so many of you on this call, and we really know that a small dedicated group can make all the difference. As Daniel was saying at the beginning, this campaign has had real impact in the past, and we're really confident that it can do again if we all get together and make this happen. This campaign, we're so excited to see what everyone gets up to in the next month. So please do take action, share what's going on, and if you've got any questions, our email address has just also been posted in the chat, so please do get in touch with us there. Thank you, everyone.